Hey! Hey, John! John!
Hey, Ricky.
John!
I said hey.
Come on! I gotta tell you something!
I can't right now, bud. I'm busy.
John! Come on!
I'll talk to you later.
Hey, look over here! What are you doing on there? What are you typing? Look over here! Hey, John! Hey, come on! John!
All right, kiddo. I'll give you my attention. What's on your mind, buddy?
Can you guess what my favorite heavy metal album is?
That's a good question, Ricky. I know you like metal a lot. It's hard for me to say for sure, but I'm gonna guess your favorite metal album is...
Wild Dogs! Reign of Terror!
Yeah, you know what? That is probably your favorite heavy metal album. That one didn't come to mind.
Yeah, I like to keep things kind of old school when it comes to metal.
Reign of Terror is a good one, though. I mean, if you're gonna go old school metal, Reign of Terror is up there. It's at the top of my list, too. Let me pull it out. I haven't listened to that one in quite a while. Let's see. There's UV, Virgin Steel. No, must be the next shelf. While Heaven Wept, White Magician, The White Noise. Here they are, Wild Dogs, Reign of Terror. Right next door to Winder and Winter Sun. This band's in pretty good company. I think this is one of those Greek bootlegs. But man, this is a great album. What's your favorite track on Reign of Terror?
Oh, that's a tough one. Probably either Spell Shock or, no, you know what? Man Against Machine. Man Against Machine. That's gotta be like the first song written about the Terminator movies, right?
I don't know. It could be. I can't think of anything else written about the Terminator before this. What year was this again?
Come on, John, you should know that. 1987. 1987 was a great year for metal. Probably like the last great year for metal of the 80s.
Well, I take your word for it. 87 sounds about right to me. Yeah, and 87 was definitely a good year for metal. I know you like the older metal stuff, Ricky, but I gotta say, I mean, you're a lot younger than me. If you think about it, you're like, what, 6 years old? You're like a kid. Even in dog years, you're younger than me. 6 times 7 is 42. I still got like a decade on you. I like newer metal better than the old stuff. I mean, I'm not saying like the last few years of metal, maybe not the last 10 years, but I like 2000s metal better than the stuff from the 80s. I do like some 80s metal, don't get me wrong, but it's quite a difference between the 80s stuff and the 2000s.
Yeah, I know you're talking about all that new Luca Turilli stuff. You just like Luca Turilli. You just gotta have metal that's got a choir and an orchestra in it and all that kind of stuff. You gotta have that, and you gotta have keyboards in your metal, and you gotta have guys that look like they probably go to church and stuff like that. That's not my style, dude. I like the 80s stuff. In fact, there's three things about current metal bands that I absolutely hate. I gotta get this off my chest. You're gonna sit there and listen to me now. I'm gonna tell you, John, I'm gonna tell you right now about 3 things about current metal bands that I absolutely hate, and I'm being willing to bet, I bet you're gonna end up agreeing with me.
All right, dude, you got my attention. I'll listen to you. What are the 3 things about current metal bands that you hate the most?
All right. I'm going to give you the one that I know you're going to agree with the most. I'm going to tell you it first because I know you hate this too. I've heard you talking to people about it. I heard you whining about it in your sleep at night, and I've looked over your shoulder, and even though I can't read, I got a good feeling you've been typing messages to other people about this same thing. I'm going to summarize this pet peeve in one word. You ready? Drums. There's something about the drums and all these new metal bands. And I'm not saying new metal like, I don't know, like the Limp Bizkit Korn new metal. I'm talking about current metal bands from like the last 20 years or so. The drums suck. They're always awful. And half the time they don't even sound like an actual person playing the drums. The drums suck. Now, what do you got to say about that?
You know what, dude? I agree with you 100%. I freaking hate the drums in 99% of metal these days. A lot of my favorite bands, a lot of bands that I have loved for years and years and years, they have just gone down the tubes because they're not using an actual drummer. And they'll put a drummer like in the credits of the album, and they'll put a picture of the drummer. And sometimes the drummer will even play something, during a recording session or whatever. But they never mic the drum set. It's always like they're triggering the drums. And then what happens is when they trigger the drums, they're triggering the drums into a computer, right? And they put the drums in a computer and they can't live with it the way it is. They got to move stuff around. They got to put the kick drum exactly right on the thing. They got to put the snare right on the thing. And then there really aren't drum machines anymore, but it all ends up sounding just like a drum machine. The drums are like, Ricky, you're pretty insightful. You've got my taste pretty well. The drums are like one of the most important things in metal. They always have been. And somehow current metal bands have absolutely forgotten how important the drums are.
See, I told you'd agree with me. I knew you would say that. I knew it. I hate the new drums too. They're not even drums. And you used to be an electronic musician, right? So you probably know what fake drums sound like. But you know what? I bet you don't even have to know about electronic music to know these drums are fake. I think a lot of times people get bored with the current metal bands and they can't put their finger on the reason why. And if they were to really sit down and analyze it, they'd kind of figure out that the drums stink too.
Yeah, and even if they're not like doing drum replacement with like samples of like an LSA's SR16 or something like that, there's so many software emulators for drums. Like when I was making electronic music a while ago, I had one that was called BFD, Big Effin' Drums, and it was like a sequel, BFD2. That was like the first one that had like, where you had like a virtual kit in your VST and you could emulate where the mic positioning was. It had all the different sounds you could swap out. It had different feels and everything like that. And you could kind of make it sound somewhat realistic. And they're way past that now. The stuff they have now is even more realistic than that. But the trouble is, it's just not human. It's different because, well, when they got the drums, they're putting the drum. Here's the other thing. All right, dude, listen to this, Ricky. They do the drums first. That's a wrong thing. You don't do that. If you are going to be like recording music with multi-tracks, track by track by track by track, even if you're a band and you all live in the same house and you play together, but you're going to record your instruments separate, you always do the drums last. Everybody knows this. You do the drums last because the drummer can pick up the feel of everything else and he can add his fills. The fills of the drums will have more meaning if they're not composed. If they come naturally with a bit of spontaneity, a little bit of improvisation. Oh, heaven forbid if a metal band has any sort of improvisation these days. But they do the drums first. And they do it first because they can get it out of the way, and then all the other guys can play to the drums, the recording of the drums, like a scratch track or something like that to the drums. But then they keep it. And they might swap out the sounds at the very end or something like that. Yeah, man, Ricky, you're 100% right. I agree with you. Your number one pet peeve about drums, I'm ranting more about it than you. But you got me on a little bit of a firestorm here. I agree with you. The drums stink in most metal.
Okay, I'm glad you agree. So, if you think about drums, who is your favorite heavy metal drummer then?
Gotta be honest, there's not a lot to pick from. Even if I go back in time, there's not a lot of metal drummers that I've liked. See, like you said, I grew up on electronic music, and that's all 100% rhythmic. So if I want to hear interesting rhythmic patterns and stuff like that, like heavy metal is the last genre of music I'm going to go to. I like a lot of jazz fusion music from the 70s and stuff. There's very interesting drummers there, but that's not what you asked me. I don't know, man. I would say Corey Christner from Manila Road. He recorded on Voyager and Gates of Fire. I think those are, as far as the drums go, those are Manila Road's two best albums, and they're at the top of the list for my favorite Manila Road albums in general. But dude, like that was 2000s. That's not recent either. Things change. It's like those two albums are 20 years old. It's quite a bit different now.
Yep. See, that's what I told you. I told you. Older metal, even if it's from the 2000s, is better than metal from the 2020s. That's for sure. All right. All right. That's the first pet peeve. Now, here's my second pet peeve. Okay. This is kind of along the same lines. What about the vocals in metal these days? Now, there's still some guys out there with good voices. I know that. And there's some newer bands that have some pretty decent vocalists and stuff like that. But there's something missing. There's something missing. In fact, no, I'm going to take it a step further. There's not something missing from vocals in current metal bands. There's something added to vocals in current metal bands. And by adding this thing to the current metal band vocals, it just sort of robs the entire performance from that metal singer. Do you know what it is? Can you guess? Can you guess? Can you guess?
Yeah, I can guess. I know exactly. We're on the same wavelength, Ricky. Sometimes we're at odds. We have our disagreements, and we may argue from time to time. But so far, I think we're going to be 2 for 2. I'm going to say pitch correction. Not auto-tune. Not auto-tune. Okay, what was it? 2000, probably 2005 again? 2007? The Holy Knights, Gate Through the Past. I love that album. I covered the song from the Holy Knights, Gate Through the Past, the song Love Against the Power of Evil. I think that was the title, right? Yeah, The Power of Love Against Evil. No, Love Against the Power of Evil. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I covered it. I don't remember. It's been so long. That album is top shelf. I love it. As far as like symphonic power metal, it's one of the best things you could get next to like the guys that had real orchestras and the Torillis. There's no plural. There's only one Torilli. But anyways, that album had auto-tune on it. Not pitch correction, but auto-tune. And you could hear it. It's robotic as hell. And it's annoying. And you hear it from time to time. That was like the first time I heard that in heavy metal. And it was really blatant and pretty obvious. It was almost done like an effect, all right? Like the rapper guys do. They use it as an effect, right? Well, nowadays, these dudes that are singing in these bands, I know they do it live. You could just watch Wings of Pegasus, which will prove to you they do it live. But they do it in the studio too. And it's a little bit more subtle in the studio. It doesn't sound as robotic, but it's flattening out all of their melodies. It's any expression that they could have in their voice is just ruined by using pitch correction. There's a difference. Auto-tune is like, it happens as you record. Pitch correction is something you apply after the fact. And you've got more control over pitch correction. You can kind of turn it on, turn it off, make it subtle, or give it a bit of a range of motion and stuff like that. But dude, Ricky, you're right. These bands, especially the young bands, I'm talking about all the bands from Canada. Canada has the worst metal scene in the world. Bloodstone is the only good metal band from Canada. In fact, I will go as far as to say Canada has had crappy music all along. Saga. I like Saga. Those Saga LPs from the late 70s into the early 80s are great. Worlds Apart, can't beat it. Heads or Tails. But as far as like actual heavy metal, Exciter, wasn't Exciter from Canada? I like the two Exciter albums, but since like the 2000s, Canada is just, all those bands are just annoying. Their personalities are obnoxious, their opinions on the world are obnoxious, and their music is just so absolutely like devoid of passion and feeling. I think Canadian musicians, boy, you really got me ranting now, Ricky. I think they're on more antidepressants than anybody else in the world because their music is just so pilled up and so sleepy sounding. God, I can't stand Canadian metal. But they all use pitch correction on their albums too. What's that one guy that everybody goes to, their favorite producer, Jeff Mills or something like that, General Mills? I forget what the guy's name is. He stinks too. And all the bands, any band he puts his fingers on, you could just guarantee it's going to be a very Manila, not Manila Road, Manila folder. It's going to be just taking it out of a drawer of folders. It's just another one of the things, another page in the book of that guy's production because it all stinks. Pitch correction. Yeah. Am I right? I ranted a bit here, but am I right?
Oh, yeah. You're right. I knew it. See, you and I, man, we're on the same wavelength with this stuff. I'm going to get you listening to 80s metal instead of the newer stuff you like pretty soon. All right. Okay. All right. Number three Number 3, the third thing that stinks about current metal. I'm just going to tell you what it is, because you're not going to guess this one, because you're one of those guys that likes all the studio stuff. You like all that stuff. I remember you bragging to somebody. We were at a gas station one time and you were getting gas, and there was this hillbilly guy over there in the other gas station, and he looked over to you and you looked over to him, and he said, "Hey man, what's your favorite Garth Brooks record?" And you said something smart like, "Man, Garth Brooks ain't got nothing on Luca Turilli and his Republican, no, Czech Republica, Czech Republic, the Czech Republic, the Republic of Czech." But you kind of said it in such a way that you made that guy think you were saying Republican to get him on your side a little bit. His Czech Republic orchestra, 30 people, because when you got his albums, you looked at the sticker on the cover one time and you said 30-piece choir, 30-piece orchestra, and you think all that studio trickery that those guys do, that guy that produced them early Rhapsody albums, Sasha Paeth, you know he was doing all kind of studio stuff and trickery. Sometimes he would replace that orchestra with sounds off of his computer, and you know that, but you never admit it, and you like all that studio stuff. So when I tell you the third pet peeve, you're not going to agree with this one. There's no way in the world you're going to agree with this one. Are you ready for me to tell you what it is?
Man, Ricky, that was something else. First of all, I would never use the term hillbilly. I would never say that. I'm only saying it now out loud because, I'm kind of quoting you when I say that. And I don't talk to people at gas stations at all. But, dude, I would never say hillbilly. In fact, that should just be called the H word. I think I should just be referred to as the H word nowadays. As far as what you're saying about all that stuff, about studio stuff, I'm not even going to argue with you. I kind of agree. You're kind of right. I do like all that stuff. There's a special technique to all that stuff, though. There's a difference between hiring an actual orchestra, even if you swap out some of the sounds here and there later on. You hear there's a boys' choir in that Prophet of the Last Eclipse album. No one else did that. Anyone that tried to do that now, they just use some VST plugin or something like that. It's boring and it's lazy. And you know what? Even more so than that, it's cheap. It's cheap. So go on. Tell me what your third pet peeve is. We may end up agreeing on this one too, buddy.
All right, maybe we will agree. I don't know. But my third pet peeve, the third thing that stinks about heavy metal these days, is that the bands don't rehearse. And I'm not saying they need to rehearse to learn how to play the songs so they could go on tour and play them live, because these bands are still touring. I know that's kind of the only way they make money nowadays. And even that, they're barely making any money. But even still, there's something about rehearsing that's critical. It's because you get all the guys in the same room together, right? And they got to play the songs 100 times. And what happens is after the 10th time, the 20th time, the 50th time, the 100th time, not only do they get tighter as a band, but they get a feel for each other's playing. And they respond to each other in real time. They change the way that they would play based on the real-time feedback they're getting from their band mates. Band mates. Mates is a key word, because these guys in these bands nowadays, they're not even friends. They don't even live in the same area. Half the time, they don't even live in the same country. And then half the time on that, the third half of the time, when they go on tour, they hire a session player, or they go to another country and they pick up a guy that plays in that country to play in their band for him. He'd never even met him before until that day. It stinks. And what happens is, in the recording that they actually end up producing, there's no feeling. No one feels like they're one unit. They're not one band, one sound. They're one brand, like 50 million tracks at a studio. One brand, 50 million tracks, not one band, one sound. And it stinks. And the music suffers because none of it sounds real. None of it sounds alive. None of it sounds like they care about each other. And you know what? In the olden days, sometimes they didn't care about each other. You listen to those old Yngwie Malmsteen records, and yeah, he made all those guys play like crap so he would sound better. I understand all that. But you know what? Sometimes when they hated him, They had a little bit of aggression in the studio to sort of respond to the annoying personality that guy has. And that response to his wig, that response to his jingling jewelry that he has all over himself when he plays around with his little guitar and he's doing his noodling and his shredding, their disdain for that, they expressed it musically. And it made the albums better. They don't even have that these days. Even if his guys don't like each other, they don't get a chance to have that sort of feeling in the studio because they're playing separate tracks and then they're sending it over the internet to the other and they're putting it all together on their computer like your Sasha Pace fellow did, and it all sounds like garbage, lifeless garbage with no human feeling. Might as well just have AI take over, because sometimes I hear that AI stuff. I hear the AI stuff and it sounds more alive than these guys today in these current metal bands.
Goodness gracious, man. You know what, Ricky? I can't argue with that. I can't argue with it. I'm going to defend Sasha Pace. I'm going to defend the exciting studio production of the metal bands from like, the mid 90s, I would say, until like 2010, 2015. They were still pretty good. I'm going to defend those guys because, like you said, I grew up on electronic music. When I was listening I didn't get into metal until the 90s. I got into this all late. And I'm not going to use that as like saying that you like older metal from the 80s because you listened. You were just born 6 years ago. So what do you know? But I did get into it late. I'll admit that. But in the 90s, before I started getting into heavy metal, Coroner was the first metal band I ever really got into. That's the first metal CD I ever purchased was Coroner. That's how I started with this stuff. So I got a whole different cycle with this than most people, right? But I was listening to electronic music. And electronic music, it's all, you buy the synthesizers, they're expensive. But in the 90s, they were buying cheap stuff from the 80s and nobody else wanted. Or like hip-hop music and stuff like that. Or R&B from the 90s, right? Like, I'm a huge Prince fan. Prince is an exception. He had his big elaborate productions. But all the other guys from the 90s, their music was cheap as hell to produce. And then I started listening to metal. I'm like, holy cow, this is the only genre of music where they actually make an effort, where they spend weeks, months, even a year in a studio recording this stuff because they want it to be the best that it possibly could be. And it was better than anything else. Metal in the 90s and into the early 2000s is the highest form of music that there ever has been. I readily admit that. And the studio production was leaps and bounds beyond anything else that was being produced. Even other rock music, all those grunge bands and all that crap, that music was cheap as heck to produce. It didn't matter. They did 1 take, 2 takes, 3 takes, whatever. It doesn't matter if they play right or not because it's just blood, drab. I don't know. Go listen to the Breeders or something like that if that's what you're into. You don't like the Breeders. You can't even breed. You're neutered. What do you know about the Breeders? Anyways. But what you're saying, Ricky, what you're saying is right. I'm not going to disagree with that either. There's a lot of bands I like. Shoot, Virgin Steel was one of my favorite bands ever. But I think almost all three of the things we're talking about are part of the reason why that band fell apart. I don't know if he's using pitch correction. I don't think he is. Only because I don't think he knows how to do it. I think he produces his whole album on like some sort of Korg Triton keyboard or something like that, some workstation. Definitely fake drums. There's definitely not a band as Virgin Steel anymore. It's like Pucelli or whatever, the guy, the guitarist, and even he's checked out. And then David DeFay. Everything else is a keyboard. What am I talking about? We're talking about, yeah. But dude, I agree. Even the bands I love from the olden days, they've thrown in the towel. They don't bother doing that elaborate studio stuff anymore. Heck, even Manowar, who never went all, hog wild with like a million tracks in the studio and stuff, but they were renowned for getting it right, making it absolutely perfect. And they did make it absolutely perfect into the 2000s. Warriors of the World is a beautifully produced album. I would even go as far as to say Gods of War, even though all the symphonic stuff on there is all fake and it shows that it's fake. And the drums, I hate to say it, Scott Columbus he didn't kill himself yet. People got to know that too. Scott Columbus killed himself. He abandoned his family and his son. I could go on a tirade about Scott Columbus, what a dirtbag that guy was. But he was alive and he's listed in the credits of Gods of War, but Those drums are all fake on Gods of War. There's absolutely zero life in that album. But they still put time, effort, and money into the studio production. It's a great sounding album. Everything after that sounds like, some garage band or something. Ricky, I agree with you. I agree with you. Your 3 pet peeves. You're right on the money, dude. And all 3 of these things kind of go together. They all go together, and I don't know, man. How would you sum up the problem with current metal bands these days in one word? If you were to combine all 3 of those pet peeves you've got, how would you summarize all 3 of that in one word?
Well, that's easy. Lazy. They're lazy. Metal is the kind of music that just should not go hand in hand with laziness. Even if you listen to, let's say some metal that's got like more of a punk rock. I mean, punk rock is some of the laziest music ever recorded, right? But even if you listen to like metal from the old days, it's got a punk rock influence. I know you love Overkill, John. And those Overkill records, there's a lot of punk happening in those Overkill records. But they're not lazy. They are not lazy. Metal today is lazy. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so damn lazy?
The easy answer to that question is that there's no money anymore. There's money in touring, but there's not that much money in touring because the venues and everything, they take such a huge cut. Even making t-shirts and stuff like that is way more expensive than it used to be. Even selling merch, they don't make much money on their merch. That's kind of the only way they got to make money, though. Because all the other stuff, the Spotifys and whatever else is out there like that, doesn't pay the bills. And that whole like vinyl revival that was going on a little while ago, that's died out. People aren't buying, records. And don't say vinyls, you say records. The plural is, the object is called a record. It's made out of vinyl, but you don't say vinyls. That's kind of a way you could tell. If someone says they bought a bunch of vinyls, there's a very good chance they like Canadian metal. Probably. But money is probably the easy answer, dude. And I think the harder answer is there's a cultural thing that's changed. So metal is not violent anymore. It used to be pretty damn violent. I always talk about Manowar. Manowar has some of the most violent lyrics of any band out there. More violent than a lot of like the death metal bands and stuff like that. At least more straight to the point violent. There's nothing poetic about the violence in Manowar's lyrics. It's just violent. There's like rape and conquest and slaughter and eyes getting gouged out and heads being knocked off and all that kind of stuff. Put them on spears. All this kind of stuff is in Manowar. Nobody writes lyrics like that anymore. There's a change in the culture, and it probably comes down to just a lack of testosterone. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And you mentioned something earlier, Ricky, about these bands being all pilled up in Canada. I think they're kind of pilled up all across the world, if you want to know the truth. I think there's just like a sapping of testosterone from a lot of these bands. I'm not even talking about... there's a lot of girls in metal bands now. Almost every band's got a girl in it. And that's part of it. I've talked about that in my Czar's Top Shelf series. I'm not going to go down that ranting rabbit hole again. But even the bands that are all dudes, they're just lacking testosterone. And metal is a man's music. You got to have testosterone. And that testosterone gives you a fighting spirit. None of these songs sound like these bands are fighting against anything anymore. They're kind of just like agreeing with their circumstances. In a lot of ways, as these current metal bands, they sort of just have the same feeling, the same sort of plodding along feeling as a lot of the grunge bands did in the 90s. The stuff that they were all up in arms about, they kind of sound like that now.
So you agree with me then? You agree. You just admitted it. You just admitted that current metal bands are 10 million times worse than the bands from the 80s. That all the current metal bands stink. You can't name one metal band right now that can compete with any of your favorite bands, even from 20 years ago. There's not a single one. You got not one shred of one tiny little metal band ever in the last 5-10 years that is any good compared to the bands that you even liked from 20 years ago, let alone the bands from the 80s. Admit it, John, admit it. You've lost, I won.
Okay, no. I will admit that there's fewer good bands nowadays. I think everybody admits that. I think even these guys that are in bands nowadays admit that their music sucks compared to bands from a few years ago. But I will not admit that there are none. I could come head to head with your argument. I could fight against your argument. Heck, I could even triumph over your argument with one word. Triumpher. Yeah. What do you think about that, Ricky? Triumpher.
Oh.
Yeah, you forgot about Triumpher, didn't you? Triumpher defies your 3 pet peeves.
All right. I can't. You know what, man? I wish I could argue with that. I wish I could say something bad, but I heard you listening to Piercing the Heart of the World like 50 times since it came out a couple months ago. You've been playing it outside really loud on your speakers so all your country neighbors hear it. You're annoying the whole gosh darn state of Tennessee with that album. And I gotta say, I commend you for it because it is a pretty darn good album. All 3 of their albums are good. This last one, though, is probably the best of the 3. And I don't know if there's going to be a better metal album this year than Piercing the Heart of the World by Triumpher. So I'm not gonna kowtow to your argument, but I'm gonna give you that one at least. I still like the old stuff. I still prefer it. But Triumpher, they would fit just fine in the mid to late 80s. But no, they wouldn't because they've got a sound that's elevated. But not going to say it. Not going to admit that. Never mind. Scratch that. Whenever you edit this video, take that out. I'm just going to say this, John. I got to end this video with one final question to you. And it's going to be something that's going to shut you up for once and for all. Here it comes. You ready? What's up with your stupid hair? When you going to get a haircut?